Crystal. I'm Crystal and I'm so glad you're here. In my classes, I like to use Pilates, yoga, and postpartum corrective exercise to help you feel great in mind, body, and spirit. You may be wondering if this class is for you, so if you are a mom, regardless of how old you are or how old your children are, this class is for you. Grab a mat and join me in your living room and let's get started. So today's class is a Mom Core Restore Tidbits. So I'll be sharing a little bit of what you will see in my more intensive 6-week program, Mom Core Restore. So today's focus is on Pilates for the core and pelvic floor, and I'll be sharing 7 exercises today. So as I said, today we are focusing on the deep core and pelvic floor. So a lot of times working these muscles, it's kind of hard to, one, see if you're working that muscle, or even to begin feeling working that muscle. So what I have today are a lot of props. I have a band, I have flowers, I'll have a balloon, we have a big ball. So I have a lot of props to kind of help with that imagery, to help us visualize how to engage those muscles. So when we're working the core, the deep core and the pelvic floor, we will use a lot of imagery and visualization, and it might seem kind of weird at first, but stick with me. Once you learn to engage these muscles and release these muscles, it will become more intuitive. And my goal is to, first in this class, we're just kind of breaking it down into itty bitty bite-sized pieces. And as your body learns that muscle memory, you can incorporate this into larger movements, any yoga class, any Pilates class. So oftentimes in pregnancy and postpartum, we're left with some muscles are overly tight, and today we will practice releasing those muscles like the pelvic floor. And then some muscles are overly weak, like the pelvic floor, and we will practice engaging that muscle, and we will also practice engaging the deep core. Some of the muscles are the diaphragm, the transverse abdominus, and those are just 2 of more muscles we will practice engaging. So the first exercise is engaging the pelvic floor and the transverse abdominus, the lower transverse abdominus in standing. So I'll go ahead and stand up. All right, so the first cue you often hear in Pilates is pull your navel to your spine. And while that might not be a bad cue, I have a couple other cues that might help you to do that, especially the lower transverse abdominus. So I'll turn to the side so you can see my posture. So oftentimes, pregnancy, postpartum, we have the rounded shoulders and the big sway back. So we want to tilt the pelvis forward, not forward with an arched back or not overly tucked with the glutes clench. We want to relax the glutes, stand up nice and tall, and go ahead and place the palm of your hands on your hip bones and the lower fingers on your lower abdomen. And so a good cue would be to begin in standing, and we want to try to tilt that pubic bone forward just a little bit. So there's a vertical line between the hip bones, the ASIS, and the pubic bone. Okay? Another good cue is to engage the lower transverse abdominus. Put your hands again on those hip bones and imagine you're bringing your hip bones together. So you would begin with a big inhale. Exhale. Imagine those hip bones are coming together and you're engaging the lower transverse abdominus. And I have another image to show you of a balloon. And on the balloon, you'll see there's written the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, and it's squeezed in the middle. So that's kind of like if you were following that cue of inhale, exhale, engage your core, pelvic floor, pulling your navel to your spine. You would be looking at that balloon, and it would look like that. So when we do that, when we pull the navel to the spine, you're only activating the middle of the transverse abdominus. And when you look at the image of the balloon, you can see how cinching at the waist puts a lot of pressure down onto the pelvic floor. This is not what we want. So we want to better manage that intra-abdominal pressure. Too much pressure down on the pelvic floor can lead to pelvic floor dysfunction. And this is not what we want, especially when we're trying to heal an abdominal separation like diaphragmatic. We want to engage the lower transverse abdominus. Again, a lot of this core pelvic floor reactivation involves a lot of mental imagery, so stick with me here. Let's go on to exercise 2. Okay, exercise 2, we're going to focus on the inhale and the pelvic floor release. So a lot of times in the postpartum period, the pelvic floor is overly tight, and a muscle has to first learn to relax and lengthen before it can contract and strengthen. So I have a prop here today. I have flowers. So we're going to begin seated, sit up nice and tall, and like I showed you in that first exercise, place the palms of your hand on your hip bones and your fingers on your lower abdomen. So we're going to begin seated. Inhale. And on the inhale, we're releasing the pelvic floor. So a good cue would be to think of a flower on that inhale. As you inhale, think of a flower opening, releasing and relaxing the pelvic floor. So think of your flower. Inhale. Exhale. Okay, use that imagery. Inhale. Release, relax the pelvic floor. Exhale. So you can go ahead and practice this a cycle of 4 or 5 breaths. Inhale. Release, relax the pelvic floor. Exhale. Inhale, release the pelvic floor. Exhale. Okay, for exercise 3, we're adding on. So we will do that inhale, thinking of the flower, and we will also focus on the exhale, contracting that pelvic floor. But for this exercise, grab a chair to sit on or an exercise ball. All right, guys, so we're seated on an exercise ball or a chair for exercise 3. So we're adding on. So sit up nice and tall. Begin with your pelvis in neutral. That means it's not tilted forward or not tilted back, so we're in neutral. And now I want you to intentionally tilt the pelvis forward, so it's kind of like you have an arch in the back. I'll sit this side. All right, so begin with your hands on your hips. Inhale, the pelvis is tilted forward. Remember we do on the inhale, release like a flower. Exhale, contract the front of the pelvic floor. So the cue is to imagine you're stopping the flow of urine on your exhale. Try that again. Inhale, relax the pelvic floor. Exhale, engage the pelvic floor. Imagine you're stopping the flow of urine, focusing on the front of the pelvic floor. One more time. Inhale. Exhale, engage the front of the pelvic floor. Okay, now let's focus on the back of the pelvic floor. This time you're going to tuck under a slight pelvic tilt like this, and we're going to focus on the back of the pelvic floor. So same inhale cue, release, think of a flower, the pelvic floor. Exhale, engage the back of the pelvic floor. So with this, imagine you're stopping gas. Again, inhale, release, exhale, engage. Back to the pelvic floor. You're thinking stopping gas. Okay. All right, so let's put it together. So we're going to combine the front of the pelvic floor with the back of the pelvic floor. We want balance. We want to engage the whole pelvic floor. So take your position of your pelvis, come back to neutral. You're sitting up in the middle, just nice and tall. And we're going to imagine on our exhale, we're engaging the front and the back of the pelvic floor. So inhale, release, think open like a flower, the pelvic floor. Exhale, engage the front. Imagine stopping the flow of urine, and the back, stopping gas. Again, engage the whole pelvic floor. Inhale, release. Exhale, contract the front. Stop the flow of urine, and the back. Imagine stop the flow of gas. One more time. Inhale. Exhale. Engage the front and the back, the whole pelvic floor. And one more cue with this whole pelvic floor engagement is to imagine in your pelvic floor you are holding a blueberry or a grape, something small. So add that visual cue. Inhale. Exhale. Imagine picking up a grape or blueberry with your pelvic floor. Try one more time. Inhale. Exhale. So we've got a few cues. Exhale, stop the flow of urine in the front. Imagine stopping the flow of gas in the back, engaging the whole pelvic floor, and you're thinking you're picking up a blueberry with that pelvic floor. Keeping that neutral posture. Very good. Okay guys, we are ready for exercise 4. So we are going to practice 360-degree diaphragmatic breathing with another prop, a band. Okay, we're gonna put this band around our ribs just for some tactile feedback. So when we breathe shallowly, if you ever check yourself when you're stressed out, your chest moves, right? We're breathing shallowly. We want to move into a deep breathing pattern. So sending the breath to your ribs, we want them to expand all the way. We want to use that diaphragm because it works in tandem with that pelvic floor. So if we can get good inhales, big exhales, that is working that pelvic floor in your deep core. So get a band. If you don't have a band, a stretchy band, you could use a belt, maybe even a long towel. All right, so putting that band around your ribs. So we're adding on, like we're playing the game add-on. So we're seated nice and tall, that neutral pelvis, shoulders are released, even release the jaw. Release tension. Okay, sitting up tall. Inhale, big expansion of the ribs. Exhale, close the ribs. Engage that transverse abdominus. So you can think navel to spine to engage the middle of the transverse abdominus. You can also think bringing those hip bones together, like we said earlier, to engage the lower transverse abdominus. We'll do this a few times, thinking of all those visual cues we had talked about. Inhale, release the pelvic floor. Remember, think it opens up like a flower. Expand the ribs 360 degrees. Big inhale. Okay, exhale, first pelvic floor. Engage the whole pelvic floor. Remember, release, stopping the flow of urine in the front pelvic floor. Imagine stopping the flow of gas in the back. Keep it exhaling. Imagine picking up your blueberry. Lower transverse abdominus engages. Ribs close. And there you have it. So a lot to think about. I know this is a lot of mental work, but the more you practice it, it'll become second nature, and your pelvic floor and your core will engage naturally with movement. And that's what we want. This is drawn out in a slow process, but once your body has the muscle memory, you can incorporate this and make any exercise a core pelvic floor exercise. One more time. Inhale. Ribs expand, shoulders relax. Release pelvic floor. Exhale, engage the pelvic floor. Engage the lower transverse. Close the ribs. Keep that nice tall posture. Very good. Okay, we're going to exercise 5. So we're taking what we just did and coming down on the floor. Supine diaphragmatic breathing. So you're going to go ahead and lie down. You can put your hands on the hip bones, ASIS for feedback. Arch the back, and then tuck the pelvis. Just a little bit of pelvic movement here. Arch and bring it flat. Come back to neutral spine. So that little space under your low back. Palms of your hands on your hip bones. Rest of your hand on your lower abdomen. Okay, releasing the shoulders. Big inhale. Widen those ribs. Exhale. Engage the pelvic floor. Remember, pick up your blueberry. Lower hip bones come together. Ribs close. Very good. All while keeping neutral spine. Inhale again. Inhale, release the pelvic floor. Exhale, engage the pelvic floor. Engage the lower transverse. Close the ribs. Navel to spine. You could also use that cue. One more. Inhale. Exhale. Very good. Okay, moving on to exercise 6. So grab a weight. All right, so we are adding on. We're going to lie down again, and I have a weight. I have an 8-pound weight. You could really use any size. 5, 8 pounds would probably be good. All right, so we're adding on. So we got our neutral spine. We're going to bring the weight back on our inhale. So notice the ribs. I'm arching. I'm flaring the ribs.
Try to keep them in neutral right here. Inhale, the ribs widen. Exhale, bring the weight down. Pelvic floor engages. Lower transverse engages. Ribs close. Do that a few times. Inhale. Exhale. Engage the pelvic floor and the core. Breathe in. And out. In. And out. Good. Inhale. Exhale. One more. Breathe in. Pelvic floor releases. Breathe out. Pelvic floor engages. All those cues we talked about earlier. Very good.
Okay, we have our last exercise. So grab a block or a pillow. Okay, I'm going to move this out our way. Okay, so this is going to go between our knees. You could also grab a pillow. So this is just to work the adductors. They're connected to the pelvic floor. So I always think, make your time, be efficient, work many muscles, work the whole body when you can.
All right, so exercise 7, this is a bridge with yoga block between the knees, lying down, neutral spine. So we're gonna keep the hips down, engage the inner thighs with everything else we talked about. Inhale to prepare, ribs widen. Pelvic floor is like a flower, it opens, it lets go. Exhale, pelvic floor engages, the front and the back. Imagine picking up your blueberry with the pelvic floor. Lower transverse engages, hip bones come together, and squeeze the block. Good, do that a few times. Inhale. Exhale, engage. Pelvic floor, transverse, adductors, inner thighs. Okay, adding on, inhale. As we exhale, squeeze pelvic floor, transverse, inner thighs, and lift those hips. So we're bringing those heels towards you a little bit. Some glute engagement. Ribs are coming down. And lower, just straight down. Inhale, prepare. Exhale, squeeze. Engage the pelvic floor. Lower core, adductors, ribs close. And lower, inhale. Exhale, up. And lower, inhale. Exhale, squeeze. And lower. So when we're engaging those glutes, glutes are a window to your pelvic floor. If you have a strong glutes, you likely have strong pelvic floor, and vice versa. Lower, inhale, exhale. Come on down. Good, go ahead and roll over to your side.
Okay guys, so that's our 7 exercises. So breaking it down using some imagery to engage the pelvic floor, first to release it, engage it, and to engage the core. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. So if you liked today's video, I have a few more things for you if you are interested in learning more about healing your core, strengthening your pelvic floor. So all this can be found on my website, crystalhendricks.com. So go there, and first I have a free download for you. It's over 7 pages, a postpartum fitness guide. So it's a free framework for postpartum fitness guide. Number 2, feel free to get on my weekly email list where I send you links to my videos and other relevant information. And number 3, if you want to dive in healing your core and pelvic floor and building strength from the inside out, sign up, get on the wait list for my 6-week intensive Mom Core Restore program. All right guys, you guys have a good day, and I will see you next time. Bye.